All right, hey ho, let's go. Our first Will Smith movie review for today is, as I promised, I, Robot, his 2004 film from director Alex Proyas. Ooh, boy, have I been excited to start reviewing some Will Smith movies. And I've been eager to do so, as you may have noticed from my filmography review video, my overview on Will Smith a few days ago that I've been wanting to do this since I started integrating real perspective a year ago. Now, Will Smith is a household name for me on this channel, and not just on this channel, but just my love of cinema altogether. He is, alongside Tom Cruise, considered to be my two favorite actors of all time. And that really says something, since, as again, I showed you on that last video, I own 14 of his movies. And that includes two of his big franchises endorsed to his name, Bad Boys and Men in Black. You know, he surpasses Tom Cruise by a margin as far as movies that I own. He's really an actor who wears so many hats and can move through different roles effortlessly like a chameleon. He's worked with some of the greatest, most critically acclaimed directors that I admire, at least in my worldview. With M. Night Shyamalan, he did After Earth. With Ang Lee, he did Gemini Man. And, in the case of I, Robot, like I said, Alex Proyas. And Alex Proyas was the visionary behind Dark City, the 1998 sci-fi movie that made it onto my top 15 most perfect movies of all time. When I assembled that list together as a pandemic project to pass the time by back in 2020. And um, of all the movies that I've seen of his, which is really only two, well, now three, including I, Robot, I have seen The Crow, and compared to The Crow and Dark City, which had more of a dark gothic hue to them, I, Robot has more of a light-hearted tonality to it, a very Disney Tomorrowland like set design. And so this was a movie that I had picked up in October of 2021, which was when I was in the midst of a Will Smith binge. I was trying to pick up as many films of his as I possibly could, since I knew that I had a lot to catch up on. Um, it, but I, Robot was a special one to me because it was definitely one that I remember in my lifetime, it was all over the news. Will Smith was, starting to play more serious roles in that movie, by this point. Even though it wasn't really his first time playing a more serious role, I would also have to include 6 Degrees of Separation, which is a movie I still haven't seen yet, but I was well aware that that movie also featured Will in a more serious role. And it's one that I really have got to get around to watching one of these days, even though he's not the main star in that film. Um, but I still remember back when I was a high school graduate that I saw clips of iRobot on Good Morning America, and the clips that I remember seeing was the interrogation scene with the rogue bot played by Alan Tudyk, who, as a matter of fact, played Wash on Joss Whedon's Firefly. Joss, I got to make sure it's not Josh, it's Joss. Um, and also the motion picture offshoot of Firefly, which is Serenity. That interrogation scene still leaves an impression on me to this very day. And my gosh, I can't believe that was 20 years ago, too. Now, iRobot is not a word for word, scene for scene recreation of the Isaac Asimov novel. Rather, the novel itself serves as a jumping off point for Alex Proyas's vision, which would make a lot of sense because if you look at the DVD credits to the film on the DVD case, you will see that the film is suggested by Isaac Asimov's book. Now, I'm going to confess to you that I have not read much Isaac Asimov, aside from reading a little bit of his Foundation series, which was actually recommended to me by an old chum that I remember who worked at the Hollywood Video when I was living in Shorewood at the time, and he loved Isaac Asimov. So he told me about the Foundation series, which was the one that involved this planet with the three suns, and that there was like an eclipse that was happening that only happens like once every 373 years or something like that. Gosh, I got to go back and read those books. But in the meantime, don't criticize this review because of my lack of knowledge on Asimov and his scientific research and how his ideas made it into this movie. I'm just giving my interpretation of this film solely on how I felt it was delivered through Alex's directorial vision. As a matter of fact, I'm going to attach a link to this video that I came across on a Reddit thread, reliable old Reddit, and it turns out you don't even have to read the original source material because the film is actually a rewrite of a previous screenplay by Jeff Vintar for a story called Hardwired. So, to jump into the movie, Will Smith plays Del Spooner, Detective Del Spooner, a loner cop with a clear hatred of robots. He makes that very clear early on in the film. And he's investigating the death of James Cromwell's character, Dr. Alfred Lanning, in what seems like a murder suicide. And Spooner suspects right away that one of Alfred's robots broke one of the three laws of robotics and went rogue, killing Alfred in the process. Now, the three laws of robotics is the only thing that was preserved from Isaac Asimov's novel. So that's really where the similarities end right there. But if you know exactly what the three laws of robotics are, I'm just going to pull it up right here. So, yeah, the three laws of robotics are one, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Second law, a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And then the third law, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or the second law. So, Alfred Lanning was not only an inventor, but he was a philosopher as well who believed that the Ghost in the Machine was meant to program robots into developing intelligence and consciousness. He basically predicted that AI and a future where robots and humans could coexist, and robots would serve humans for the greater good. This is actually where he also talks about random clusters of code that create various different protocols inside the machine, or what he defines as behavior. Now, filtering this down through the lens of my worldview, this sounds an awful lot like Anterro Alli's book, Angel Tech. Now, as somebody who thinks more about the soft sciences when watching a film like iRobot, now, my understanding is that the the three laws of robotics seem very, very similar to the eight levels of intelligence, the eight circuits of intelligence that Timothy Leary had pioneered, which was a model that Anterro Alli would use as the basis for Angel Tech. So, you have your four basic circuits, physical, emotional, conceptual, and social intelligence. Then you have your four upper post-survival circuits, which are sensory intelligence, psychic intelligence, mythic intelligence, and spiritual intelligence. So essentially, each of these eight circuits are like eight mini brains. And these different circuits are the foundation for understanding behavior. So I feel that when I look at Spooner's character in this movie, and how he sees that robots are a detriment to humans, it's because he sees so much that he hates about himself in robots. And this whole movie is like this really colorful interplay of behavioral dynamics between robots and humans. And the differences which divide the two races apart, as well as the similarities in which both humans and robots reflect off of each other. Um, but at the beginning of the movie, Spooner doesn't really see it that way. He believes that there is an uprising in which humans are going to be a slave to robots. Um, and, this grudge towards robots began from an accident in which he nearly drowned. Um, what happened was there were two cars that were pinned together. They fell off the road and into the sea, and there was a little blonde girl, unfortunately, who drowned as a result. And it's really sad when you see this same incident replaying in Will Smith's dreams throughout the movie, because when the police robot, the patrol robot, came to save Spooner, it was because the robot was doing it off of a statistic scale. It saw that Spooner had a 34% chance of survival, whereas the little girl only had an 11% chance of survival. 11%. Now, according to Spooner, he saw that 11% was still high enough and that they both deserve to live. But it's, because of the fact that he survived and that he's had to have enhancements done that Lanning himself performed on him, that have now made Spooner part man and part robot. Now, that being said, while Lanning, while he does have a grudge against Lanning by default because of his hatred towards robots, Spooner is still doing a favor by helping Lanning out. And it's it's really, really, at first it's hard to take it seriously because his his talk with Lanning at the beginning of the film, where you see the corpse of Lanning, and then you also see this holographic drone or like a microcomputer that generates this hologram of Lanning. They're talking back and forth, and Lanning is saying really, really cheesy lines like, "I'm sorry, my responses are limited. That is the right question to ask." It's like, whatever. But, even so, despite the cheese factor, I do believe that the message this film is trying to hit home is that robots are inevitably the next stage in human evolution. And of course, James Cromwell's speech about the ghost in the machine and about um, his analysis on behavior, that part of his acting was really fascinating. I felt that I, Robot expanded upon what Steven Spielberg started out with in his 2001 movie AI, Artificial Intelligence. The early 2000s seemed to be a time where Hollywood was really obsessed with expressing robots in various different storyline settings. Now, if you look at the movie Robots from 2005 with Ewan McGregor and Robin Williams, that movie explores a, a robot's need to pursue his destiny by looking at what its potential is to invent something new that society has never um, marketed and manufactured before, something that households would want to use. I, Robot, though, in comparison to that, is more about a film that explores the phases that a robot goes through when learning how to feel human-like emotions, when learning how to, you know, discover its own humanity within. So the interrogation scene that I keep bringing up, I know I highlighted, showed a rather brilliant example. I thought Alex did a great job putting this scene together. When Spooner is, pushing Sonny, and by the way, Sonny is the name of the robot that is being convicted of having murdered its creator, Dr. Alfred Lanning, and it's revealed that Sonny is the name that Alfred gave him. So during this interrogation scene, when Spooner is interrogating Sonny, to give him answers on what led him to kill Alfred, Sonny slams his fists on the table and says, with, deliberate and persistent conviction, "I did not murder him." And then he looks down at the imprints that he left on the metal table, astonished at how much strength he actually has. And then, after a long pause, Spooner tells him, based off of his observation, that one's called anger, to infer Sonny's confusion at expressing such capacity to defend himself. The fact that Sonny is not a drone, that he actually has consciousness, sentience. There's, really so much mystery to human behavior and intelligence that I think robots have been invented, according to Alfred's view, as a way of understanding the deeper mysteries of human interaction. It sounds like something that I'm sure David Hawkins, who created the map of consciousness, which started out with his book Power versus Force, he must have loved iRobot. I wouldn't be surprised. Now, there's another character in the film Dr. Susan Calvin, played by Bridget Moynihan, who is responsible for helping the robots how to feel. Interestingly enough, her and James Cromwell played together in The Sum of All Fears, a Jack Ryan movie from 2 years earlier. And so Calvin, Dr. Susan Calvin, is the robot psychologist. Now, she initially gets defensive about, um, she stands up for the robots and considers Spooner's cynicism to be off-putting, which is until strange behavior starts running afoot involving the robots. Basically, Spooner starts to become the target of all sorts of unusual and often life-threatening circumstances. A demolition robot automatically reprograms itself for an earlier time to destroy Lanning's house at a time when Spooner is inside the house attempting to, you know, get more information on Lanning's death, which is where, he watches that old video blog where Lanning was giving a speech about um about behavior as being these random components of code. Yeah, so it's at that moment that that demolition robot seems to be self-aware that Spooner knows too much or is learning too much and almost kills Spooner by destroying the house. And then, of course, there's the incident on the freeway when the NS5s start attacking Spooner while he's behind the wheel in his car. And even worse, the car accident that results in this causes Spooner's shoes to melt. Like the soles of his shoes get really, really tarry looking. And he really loses his shit at that point when his lieutenant, John Bergen, played by the wonderful Chi McBride, continues to be skeptical, continues to have a hard time grasping what Spooner is, trying to tell his lieutenant. Um, and at this point, Spooner completely lashes out at him. And he lashes out at some of the other officers. Do you think I really care about what you think about me? Yeah, I thought that little bit of acting right there was just incredible. Where it's like he just really, at this point snaps to make you realize that he's really the only sane person in this otherwise very lackadaisical, complacent society. Um, which, by the way, the movie itself is set in a futuristic Chicago in the year 2035. Um, and there's like robots that are dressed up as FedEx delivery men. One of them actually Spooner comes into contact with as he's leaving to go visit his grandmother, who makes these really delicious sweet potato pies that he seems to love so much. And as a matter of fact, it's revealed at one point that when his grandmother notices how much Spooner loves her sweet potato pies, she reveals who it is that's making them, and it's a service robot. So it's like all these NS5s, are starting to now take over. It doesn't start out that way though, because there's these older models in the film that are serving as service robots, and they are going to be replaced by the NS5s. And that's where I should really start getting into that. Um, So there's this guy named Lawrence Robertson, or I'm sorry, Lawrence Robinson, played by Bruce Greenwood. And he's the one who is making these NS5s, which basically are these very lifeless looking, translucent white robots. And Sunny is one of those robots that goes completely rogue. And these robots are a product of this AI supercomputer who goes by the name Vicky, this female that ends up subverting the three laws of robotics in order to evolve her consciousness, which means her nefarious plan starts to unravel. It means that she wants to protect humans in order to prevent their eventual self destruction. But what that means is basically saying that humans need to be told what to do as if they were little children. Eventually, Calvin and Spooner do team up with one another after they discover Lawrence Robinson himself getting murdered by one of these NS5s through the control of Vicky. Because now at this point, Vicky goes complete full anarchy. So I gotta take some time now to detach and point out some faults in this movie. One of the things that I noticed about this film is that Alex was trying a bit too hard to imitate Steven Spielberg with this film, with the glossy mechanical world building of a futuristic Chicago in 2035. It almost makes me wonder if the movie Divergent was trying to imitate iRobot, considering that the film came out 10 years after iRobot, like some sort of subliminal celebration for that movie. Yeah. And interestingly, both of those movies were set in a futuristic Chicago as well. Hmm, coincidence. I gotta admit too that the music in this film sounded pretty generic, which is interesting since Marco Beltrami composed the music for some big blockbuster films, which include two of the standalone Wolverine movies from the X-Men franchise. And these are the standalone Wolverine movies with Hugh Jackman in the title role. So that would be 2013's The Wolverine and Logan from 2017. So that being said, the glue that really holds this film together and what makes this film excellent, what actually makes it work, is the interaction between Will Smith and Alec Tudyk as Spooner and Sonny. You can see that both of these characters are idealists, and the behavior interactions between the two just cause these two characters to really set off some sparks that really inject life into this film and really set it in motion. They start out hating each other. I mean, even though I would say that Sonny is one who tries to be a pacifist compared to Spooner, who just like out and out wants to beat the crap out of Sonny, yeah? And basically destroy any robot that he sees. But over the course of the movie, and especially towards the end, they learn to understand each other's point of view. they actually come to a common consensus and discover that robots really are the next stage of evolution, which also means that robots have to learn free will like humans and work to carve out an identity of their own, which is also why there's this sketch that Sonny draws, almost as if he's like an automaton at one point in the film. And the image is an extract from a recurring dream that Sonny actually has, which I feel has a double meaning to it. You see this figure standing up at the top of the hill by the ruins of what looks like the Golden Gate Bridge, even though the film is shot in Chicago. Well, he's extending his hands in service to all these other robots. Now, at first, we're supposed to think that this is Spooner, the figure, the lone figure that's standing at the top of that hill. But it turns out that the prophecy, according to this illustration, is that it is Sunny. But I still think that the movie could have gone in the direction of where Spooner is actually the one who stands up at the top of the hill. Kind of a way of coming full circle, where, Spooner's dreams now completely change to him becoming a vigilante against robots to now becoming a leader for robots. So yeah, anyways, um that's all I have to say as far as plot and story details about the film. One more thing I got to mention about this movie is Shia LaBeouf. 3 years before his first major starring role in Disturbia, love that movie. He did play a bit part in I, Robot as Farber, Spooner's friend. His role was really amusing to watch. I thought he was great. He shows off his wannabe ladies man like charms and just causing trouble every time Spooner passes by. Spooner even telling him to stop cussing at one point, as if to point out that he comes off as being really, really fake when trying to play into his street swag. Just goes to show that Will Smith, despite being black, was never one of those guys that really was wanted to be one of those in the hood type of hustlers sort of figures. And that's why it's like he's disgusted every time that Farber tries to come off as being, like a pimp or anyways. So yeah, that's everything that I have to review on iRobot. This film was definitely a sleeper. It's when first watching it, it seems like it's style over substance, but I mean that just comes as a product of its times, the early 2000s after all. AI, Bicentennial Man, robots, it does kind of blend into the background a bit. But closer inspection on this film reveals that there is way more to it that will leave you pondering a lot of things regarding our daily interactions between human and machine. Though Ex Machina, which would come out 10 years later, would go much, much more deeper and under the surface. But for now, it's like back in 2004, we had this movie, which had a very, very intriguing look at the interweaving behavior dynamics between the two entities, between these two life forms. The differences in behavioral responses and where the line blurs between the two. There's a pretty colorful thread pattern to examine in how robots and humans mirror one another and their aspiration to understand each other as well. And by learning to understand robots, we can learn to understand each other. So I definitely would recommend this film. Will Smith has some really witty, hilarious lines of dialogue. One of my favorites is when he sneezes while Greenwood is giving a lecture to Calvin, where he's smugly defending the NS5's reliability. Will Smith's like, "Shoo, uh, sorry, I'm allergic to bullshit." Charming. So yeah, get out there and see iRobot for sure. And that is my review for today. So I am on now to the next Will Smith movie. Don't know what it'll be, but I will leave you surprised, that's for sure. So stay tuned for my next Will Smith movie review. And in the meantime, thank you so much for hanging out with me on the reel, and I will see you on the flip side of the reel. Ciao.